This is a video I've been waiting a while to do, based along a lot of the issues that we've seen in certainly the last 9 months in the UK, and I wanted to kind of set the record straight. Recently I was accused of being xenophobic, and I wanted to kind of put my side of the story. Some might think that the title of this video is clickbait. It isn't, and it will all become apparent in a minute. My 8-year-old daughter recently asked me, she said, "Daddy, what's racism? What does racism mean?" And I said to her, and I had to think really hard. I had to come up with an explanation that she'd understand, and that I understood that she would be able to communicate what I was saying. So I said to her, imagine if I said that there was this new piece of fruit you'd never tried. I said, it's the most wonderful thing you'll ever taste from a far off land. And I put a blindfold on you and I said, here, try this piece of fruit. She put the fruit in her mouth and I said, it was the most wonderful thing you've ever tasted. You know, the flesh just fell apart. It was so full of all these wonderful flavours. And I then said, do you want another piece? She said, yeah. And then I took the blindfold off. And I said, then you'd say, ooh, I'm not eating that, it's green. And she said, just because of its colour? I said, that's ridiculous, Daddy. And I said, exactly, that's racism. However, I've noticed a worrying trend in the last few years, particularly leading up to the Brexit referendum in the UK. And this worrying trend is anything that, even in the slightest of manners, verges into leaving Europe, concerns about immigration, concerns about Islam. Automatically, by wanting to have that debate or just raising that slightly, the far left seem to have this desire now to throw any pejorative and accuse you of being alt-right or far-right or racist. Now, I have 2 Indian godchildren from a very, very good friend of mine who is an ex-Muslim. Not that that should make any difference to my opinions, but I was also a practicing Muslim. For about 5 years. And my personal opinions are, I have genuine concerns about where Islam is heading in the UK. I have genuine concerns where Islam is heading globally. I have even bigger concerns that the left and the far left are ignoring any issue, and that there's this constant barrage of double standards and hypocrisy. Most notably, if we look at the event in Barcelona recently, for example, awful tragedy. Instinctively almost, the mainstream media refused to make the link between the far right Wahhabist Islamists, and there's instantly this move away from Islam and Muslims completely. Yet when we saw an equally cowardly act, I should say, in Charlottesville, immediately the mainstream media and the far left made the link to white supremacists, the alt-right, and neo-Nazis. Regardless of whether the link is right or not, we can't have double standards. We can't have one rule where we make the link between a group and an incident, and then in another identical situation, we hide that link. While I was a practicing Muslim, I asked 2 imams this question. I said, if Islam and the Hadiths preach how inclusive and how peaceful and how welcoming Islam is a religion, why does the term kufr appear in the Quran over 400 times in its various grammatical uses. And I didn't get a sensible, rational answer from either of them. I got a collection of excuses and then trying to confuse me with Islamic doctrine and rhetoric. I also have this issue with this term Islamophobia and Islamophobic. So we're going to move on to a brief discussion about Tommy Robinson and Douglas Murray, for example. Now you see, as we all know, a phobia is an irrational fear. So when we apply this to Islam, for example, if we look at global security services statistics for numbers or percentages of the Islamic global population who are of the kind of Deobandi, Wahhabist, literal interpretation of the Quran, radical Islamists. And the average statistic is roughly between 28% and 20%. So if we just apply that number at the conservative level, let's just say 20%. Just in the UK alone, that's nearly 250,000 radical Islamists. If we make it against global numbers of the fastest growing religion on the planet, that's the population of America. That's nearly 330 million people. And then we look at what creates the fear. We saw just during the month of Ramadan, 1,500 people died in Islamic terrorist attacks. We had 3 significant attacks in the UK alone within an incredibly short period of time. So we have globally and across Europe and in the UK a substantive number of people, and linked to the ideology that they follow is a wave of terrorist activity that specifically targets Western individuals. Is that an irrational fear, or is that a perfectly justified fear? And then when we see the ways that anybody that dares to challenge an ideology, and I'm going to make an issue here and make a point about ideologies. I'm massively opposed to Islam. I'm massively opposed to Catholicism. I'm massively opposed to Scientology. Somebody that has suffered from mental health, I find Scientology absolutely abhorrent. This is an alleged religion that basically was created by a man who holds records for writing more bullshit than any man that's ever breathed, and purports to have a staircase religion where it costs you money to get better. That doesn't get any more disgraceful in my book. Catholicism, here's a good one. Who've been racked with their own scandals, shall we say. The paedophilia scandal within the Catholic Church, which appeared to it didn't appear, it did. It went across numerous countries, all the way from Europe to America. Then when you consider Catholicism, here is a religion that says its priests can't marry, they can't have sex, and every Sunday they're to dress like a woman. And then they wonder why they were abusing choir boys. In any other context, it's the funniest joke in history. In that context, it's horrendous. I have no issue in your skin colour. Not at all. Absolutely none whatsoever. What I do have an issue with is equality. For me, my desire in life is to see one rule of law, one rule of morality applied in one direction to everybody. When I get that, I'll be happy. But if people want to make reference to me about my political beliefs or my opinions, and then want to level a disgusting accusation, at least back the fucker up. I don't think that's too much to ask, personally. there are aspects of Islam that I have massive concerns at, as a previously practicing Muslim, and as a previously practicing Christian, and as a human being. Recent figures by the NSPCC, backed up by a number of police forces, claimed figures of female genital mutilation in the UK at 5,200, which is 5,200 too many. However, a number of Muslim charities, including and in addition the Muslim Council of Great Britain, felt that those figures were incredibly conservative, and actually the actual figures were probably 20 to 30,000. And if you look, and please feel free to do this, don't take anything I'm saying as facts, go and look it up for yourself. The response from numerous police forces with regards the issue of female genital mutilation, they basically have said they felt that community cohesion, diversity and political correctness were far more important than young girls being butchered. Okay, so if being opposed to female genital mutilation makes me a racist, you've got me, ladies and gentlemen, bang to rights. I'm a racist bigot. There are countries into double figures who still have homosexuality as a crime. In fact, in a recent poll, over 50% of UK Muslims said they wanted homosexuality recriminalised. There are countries where being homosexual, where following who you are as a human being ends up with you being thrown from a building. And by some of the punishments, that isn't a bad way to go. I'm old enough to remember some of the documentaries in the 80s where HIV and AIDS was classed as the gay disease. Those things still send shivers of shame down all of our spines, I should imagine. But we've progressed. I am so fundamentally proud of the country I live in, not only because of its multicultural tapestry that's so rich and wonderful, but that we've allowed gay marriage, and that we've progressed enough to be liberal enough for these things to become normal. I don't want to go backwards. So I oppose the brutal murder of homosexuals. I oppose the recriminalisation of homosexuality. If that makes me a racist, you got me. I'm a racist bigot. We've seen over recent times the horrific rape scandal case, which amazingly the BBC desperately try not to link with the word Muslim, even though the vast majority of convictions up to now have been Pakistani and Bangladeshi Muslim men. I can tell you from my own experience, it clearly says in the Quran that sex slaves, this is in the Hadiths as well, are acceptable under Islamic law, under Sharia law. Take what your right arm desires. One individual, I believe it might have been in Worcester, can't remember, but he actually tried to use as part of his defence that this was his religious right. We saw police forces, we've seen local authorities, we've seen social services cower in fear under the banner and powerful nature of political correctness. In Rotherham alone, there were 1,400 victims. As some of you know, I used to work in social care, and a colleague, without making any mention of identification, said that one of the girls is in a psychiatric secure unit within Leicestershire, and she was horrified at the damage that had been done. And there was a distinct possibility that this individual may never leave psychiatric care. The likes of Tommy Robinson were saying this 10 years ago, and we all laughed and we all mocked. Oh, listen to the silly fucking racist. Go drag your knuckles elsewhere. Yeah, we're not laughing so much now, are we? Because it wasn't just Rotherham, it was everywhere. Bristol, Nottingham, Derby, Leicester, Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, Bradford, Newcastle, Sunderland. Political correctness has become so powerful that community cohesion, what a buzzword that is, diversity, were more important than protecting some of the most vulnerable in our society. I'm not saying I agree in everything that Tommy Robinson has said and done. I think turning up at an EDL rally in camo probably wasn't the smartest move. But what does interest me about Tommy Robinson is the fact that himself and Douglas Murray fundamentally are saying the same thing, that we need to look at Islam. Islam needs to progress. They're saying that immigration, or particularly open borders, has caused massive issues, not just for the UK, but more importantly Europe as a whole. And that did play a part in the Brexit vote. Of course it did. But to label everybody with any negative racial pejorative you can think of probably wasn't the smartest idea. But what does concern me is the way that those two particular individuals are treated. Tommy Robinson, a self-confessed working class uneducated man from Luton, and Douglas Murray, maybe not necessarily self-confessed, but a middle class, well educated from a top university. Yet they're treated completely differently. Tommy Robinson is consistently vilified and labelled with the racist card. Funny, he's never actually said anything racist, because if he had, he would have been arrested and he would have suffered the stiffest possible penalty. I'm sick and tired of everything coming down to a left or a right argument. We're being played by the media and we're being divided at every opportunity. We even saw the tragic case of Charlie Gard being made a left or right issue. I do think the millennials, as they're called, are being manipulated through the earliest stages of their education. And I agree that 80% of our Muslim population are wonderful, law-abiding, family people with great values who, as a community, we can all learn from. And I will be the first person to stand with the likes of Majid Nawaz to challenge the backwards and, quite frankly, outdated rhetoric of Islam. But just because we want to have this debate doesn't mean we're racist. That's just a lazy, ignorant, ill-informed, uneducated, far-left view of people that aren't able to argue their own point. They don't even understand what they're arguing. YouTube is filled with videos of these Antifa morons not even able to understand the matter at hand. They can't even argue their own agenda. But back to the point, you know, the victims of the rape scandal could easily exceed 10, 20, 30,000. So if being opposed to young girls being used as sex slaves, being gang raped by multiple men, if that makes me a racist, you fucking got me. I'm a racist bigot. The funny thing is, the term bigot, somebody who refuses to acknowledge or listen to another's point of view, remind you of the far left? The fact is, this isn't about race. It's about a dangerous ideology that needs to be globally progressed. And Majid Nawaz is somebody that I have a huge amount of respect for. I think he has to play a difficult political game, which can sometimes make his intentions sometimes questionable. But if you listen to him on his radio show, you know, he will regularly stand up and shout down those more radical Islamic views. And people make this reference, don't they, about the Quran? Oh, well, you know, the Old Testament and the earlier revisions of the Bible. Well, that's your answer. Earlier revisions of the Bible. We're now on to version 2.0 of the Bible. It was watered down to be made more palatable to flog it around the world. And the fact is, the Quran is untouched. And rather than creating this division, setting left against right, Muslim against non-Muslim, Everybody should have the right to free speech. Everybody should have the right to say what they like. You don't have to agree with it, but we should always defend their right to say it. Whether it be the villainous, nasty pieces of shit like Nick Griffin or Anjem Choudhury at the other end. But do I think Anjem Choudhury should be in prison for just opening his mouth? No, I don't. I think he should be in prison for his links to terrorism. But if nothing else, I implore you to do one thing. One thing. Be careful of what the mainstream media tell you. The attack at Finsbury Park was an absolute disgrace. It was a racially motivated attack by an individual who will more than likely hide behind the excuse of mental health. And for somebody that suffered mental health, that disgusts me. However, let's not forget that Finsbury Park, as recently as 2005, had their HSBC bank account suspended because after auditing they found links to Middle Eastern terrorist groups. Let's not forget that this was the mosque that gave us Anjem Choudhury, Abu Hamza, Abu Qatada. But when we look at the likes, particularly with the YouTube generation of Abu Halima, I would still defend his right to say his piece, even if I despise every single word of it. His vile comments about homosexuality. I don't know how anybody can stand behind an ideology that allows an innocent woman who's been the victim of rape to be stoned to death. And if opposing that and saying that that's a barbaric, backwards process, if that makes me a racist, you fucking got me. I'm a racist bigot. When actually, for all of my bluster, I just want people to get along. I don't give a shit what your skin colour is. I don't care what you believe in. So long as you're not hurting another human being, I don't care. But I will stand by how far the population that I live within has progressed. You're damn right I will. And rather than getting involved in these media slurs against the likes of Tommy Robinson, the knuckle-dragging racist, allegedly, why don't we actually listen to what they're saying? Why don't we listen to the warnings? Rather than allowing the Islamic apologists who infiltrate the vast majority of our government and misinterpret and misquote the Quran. And this is what annoys me, because the vast majority of you who will pass judgment on this video, or pass judgment on people like me who have an issue with how Islam is being funded, how it's being spread in the UK, are automatically called racist. Yet I was a Muslim. I've read the Quran. I've read the Quran and the Hadiths. The vast majority of those on the far left spouting your poisonous pejoratives at anybody that dares want to have a debate or a talk about immigration have probably never even seen a Quran, let alone fucking read one. I'm going to end it because the dog's knackered. I don't think I necessarily follow any religion now. I think I've learned that they're all toxic in their own little way. But Jesus did leave me with one thing. Fundamentally, his message was very simple. Love yourself, love your neighbour, and the world will be a better fucking place. I don't remember Muhammad saying anything remotely the same. Peace, people.